list was Derek. If Derek, if you're primed and ready to go,
Yep,
amazing.
no
The
problem
thumbs
at
up,
all.
super
And
duper.
similarly, I will try to keep this really short as well. Unfortunately, I don't have as good quantitative data as the previous speaker. I'm so sorry. I'm very conscious of the fact that we need to start collecting different types of data. We collect a lot of information at the Open University. That's where I work. Distance education, and we teach design at a distance as well. But I'm wondering actually now whether we're actually collecting the right sorts of data. I'll try to explain why. This is actually just reflective evidence from about 10 years of my sort of teaching practice. I used to be an associate lecturer with the Open University, so that was a practitioner who also looked after tutor groups. Now, it wasn't our responsibility to teach material, it was our responsibility to act as coaches for small groups of students. And this is actually a photograph from one of my very first tutorials, and I remember being absolutely gobsmacked that these adult learners, I had to actually tell them it was okay to use coloured pencils, it was okay to use paper that didn't have lines on it, and it was okay to fail, it was okay to do a whole bunch of stuff that I just take for granted every single day as a designer. And that made me realise that there's a whole bunch of stuff that is not being delivered in the curriculum structurally. And I really do genuinely worry about it. I'm not entirely sure that the secondary education space is entirely the space to do something about that. I think some of the stuff we've been trying to do with Curriculum for Excellence in Scotland or failing to do has been interesting along those lines. I think there's definitely a really important place in the primary curriculum that sets this up, because I think the point about this is that without these sorts of dispositions, attitudes, cognitive superpowers, we are not going to leverage these genuinely alternative ways of acquiring knowledge. And it's interesting that that word knowledge is in there. As I say, I come from the Open University, and that's where, on top of Bruce Archer's work, the work of Nigel Cross really tried to set design knowledge as something that sat between, if you like, traditional forms of scientific, if you like, analytical knowledge, and synthetical knowledge or creative knowledge. And I think if we don't focus on that, that kind of development, I suppose, of these other cognitive richnesses, if you like, in our next generation, then we're going to fail, because what we are seeing in higher education is that we are having to do that. Now, we are in a unique position in the Open University. We are teaching adult self-selected learners. They are not necessarily saying, I'm creative, I want to be an architect, I want to be an interior designer. They're coming at this from a very different angle. And that shows me a different profile, if you like, of the UK graduate, or the disposition towards the creative and art industries from the UK population generally. And that's a bit of a worry. Now, I think there's lots of things we could actually do to tweak a curriculum that could actually make a massive difference to these kind of attitudes and mindsets. I've got a few ideas about that. But anyway, I just wanted to present that evidence from my, I suppose, own reflection over the last 10 years. That's what we're seeing in our current graduates coming in. And it takes a lot of work to uneducate people from thinking that there is a single solution to something, to realizing that the world is actually slightly difficult and it actually needs responses as opposed to solutions. So there we go. Quick one.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Derek. And that's really interesting. What you said at the start struck me about the type of evidence that we can gather too, because it is very difficult. And I think it takes things like this call for evidence to actually sometimes be provoked into realizing that as a sector, we're not always that good at getting the numerical data through. But that was really, really wonderful. And it's lovely to see more evidence as well for the fact that creative and design education can actually be some learners' first experience, like positive experiences in education too, and they're having to relearn the way to do things in a nice and engaging way. Really, really wonderful. Thank you so much, Derek. And again, I have a million questions. I'll probably speak to you sometime after this because it's very, very interesting. I'm sure everyone else will too. I think the third on our list was Kate, if Kate's around and ready to go. Look at that.
I'm
Oh,
here.
we are not wasting time here, are we? This is great.
Can you see me and can you see the slides?
Perfect. All over to you, Kate.
Great. Okay. So this is probably more of a provocation, I think, rather than necessarily evidence, but let's see. So my name's Kate King. My background is in working in innovation and design thinking for 25 years, but I teach design thinking to the product and industrial design course at Herts Uni. I suppose the stat that I can provide on that is that that is one of our closing courses, and it finishes this year. But alongside that work, I also teach corporate training. So I know that the real world still want these skills. So we've got that kind of pipeline issue. But starting my kind of start point for this provocation is, having worked in innovation, I know that creativity and failure are kind of inextricably linked. They have that sort of symbiotic relationship. If we're going to try and do new stuff, that means we need to take risks, and risks, of course, inherently are going to lead to some amount of failure. But if we learn from that failure, that's how we move forward.
Hey,
So,
just super quickly, I think the slides jumped away again. I'm not sure if they're
did
being
they?
shared at the moment. Yeah, I think they
Let me have
popped up
another
and then
try.
popped down again.
Hang on one moment. Windows, hang on. You seeing them now?
I can see that. Can everyone see that okay? Seeing lots of
And
nods and
if I
thumbs
do
up.
that, do you still see it, or is that gone?
Oh, that goes when that happens.
No,
Yeah, that's
okay,
what.
right, I won't do that then. Let me just change the window size and you'll be able to doing that. Okay, you're going to end up seeing some notes, but that will be fine by me. Okay, so my point being that innovation, failure and creativity are inextricably linked, and we need the two in order to make progress and move forward and to innovate. Of course, failure, a tricky term in education, as education is set up in a way that we don't typically embrace failure. And I think that's interesting because there are lots of different types of failure. And of course, some we do want to avoid, but some are the way that we do move forward. So we want these top right types of failure, called gold mines or smart failure or productive failure, where there are really high learning opportunities. What we want to avoid, and I think where education can take us, and I do see some of this in our students, is the sort of perfectionism and the fear of failure that leads to lessons lost. So not all failure is equal. I think design thinking is a great method for sort of de-risking innovation. We have the empathy at the start, where we are able to deal with ambiguity and to empathize with people and understand their real problems. And then we have prototyping, testing, and learning. And those two things together, I think, help to really de-risk that innovation process. It's not just me thinking that way. So recently, doing my PG cert, I came across iSotl, who are calling for a number of grand challenges for the scholarship of teaching and learning in higher education. And they're wondering, their number one challenge is, how do we develop critical and creative thinkers? So people who can do both. And I think that's design. I think that's design thinkers. It is, of course, quite rare to be able to do both things. Typically, one is taught over the other, and obviously there's often a hierarchy, so critical thinking is more commonly taught. But in design, we do both, and we need both because we're trying to tackle increasingly complex problems, wicked problems. We have AI on the rise, and we need to be able to differentiate our thinking. And I think being able to adopt this critical and creative thinking is one way to do that. So going back to the double diamond that we teach at Hertfordshire, and I know in a lot of design higher education courses, it is this ability to kind of open up, diverge our thoughts, and then converge, where we're creating lots of choice and then using our critical thinking skills to make the right choice, that I think really helps design thinking stand apart and answer some of those challenges set by SOTL. It's also in the mindsets that we teach with design thinking. So, of course, it's not just a process or an approach, but actually those mindsets, I think, mirror some of the work of Carol Dweck really nicely around growth mindset. I know has been adopted certainly in my children's primary school. I'd quite like to see more of it in the secondary school, but this idea from learning from failure is not new there. The final slide, I am interested in the idea of not just design thinking for mastery, so teaching designers how to do design thinking, but also design thinking is being increasingly used as pedagogy to teach other subjects. And I like that idea, particularly collaboration, empathy, prototyping, those skills in other subjects. But I think if we want to get that right, we don't just need to think about the teaching and learning activities. We need the right mindsets to deliver that psychological safety. And we need to think about the assessment so that failure is not viewed in the way it is currently within our education system. So that's it. Whistle stop tour.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's so interesting to me as well that sort of the notion that failure has come up in both of the talks with you and Derek. And if I were a betting man, I'd bet that Naomi's groups as well often had an element of experimentation and failure encouraged within their works as well. It just shows how unique this type of education is and how valuable it can be. Thank you so much for speaking. And I think we're going to move on swiftly now to, we have a Mark speaking fourth in fourth spot. Is Mark around and ready?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, hiya there, Mark. Are you good to go?
Yeah, good to go. I'm just going to try and share my slides. So
Super stuff.
hopefully, hopefully this will work.
So far, so good.
That work?
Yeah, we're in business,
Brilliant.
Mark. Yes,
Okay,
over
so
to you.
I have tried to condense this into a really small number of slides. There are quite a few, but 4 minutes is a challenge, and I put it together today. So really quick introduction. I'm the course leader for the BA Product Design course at Sheffield Hallam. I think it's really interesting, leading on from emphasis on embracing failure. So this is a pass-fail module pilot we did a few years ago. I think this is post the pilot, but this summarizes the issue really for me. So I have students in their first year who will say, I know I got a first, but how do I get a better mark? And I say, don't worry about the grade, focus on the feedback. Clues are in the feedback. So talking a lot with students at the minute about, you may have seen the design squiggle, and when students want really clear answers and they look to tutors to give them the answers, or say, yes, that's correct, or no, it's wrong. Really, it's messy. We know it's a messy process. And the idea that we need to be able to embrace that uncertainty and messiness. So I think my kind of two gaps that I thought in relation to the curriculum review, it picks up on the things that Derek and Kate have both mentioned. So students are often risk averse and fixated on attaining a higher grade, and there's limited emphasis on genuine kind of creative development process and maybe exploring creativity in the right phases of the design process. So I think, yeah, that's really summarizing my top three things: embracing creative risk and failure at appropriate stages, and then maybe less emphasis on the grade attained and more willingness to respond to critical feedback. The pass-fail module pilot was with level 4 students in their first semester, and it was with particular focus on assessment and feedback. The pilot group consisted of 8 students, and we did it in 2017-18. I'm really rattling through this. The module's now been superseded by some new first-year modules, design essentials, design interactions, but fundamentally, it's about teaching students skills and strategies through a range of creative projects. We're not assessing the skills we teach, we're assessing the creative application of the skills we teach. And I think that's a really important distinction that we try and make with the first years. So key findings from the pilot study, there was a bit of a conversation around the pressure of academic achievement in the module. Students thought that the pass-fail marking kind of removed that pressure to receive a really good mark. And obviously they felt less worried about the overall mark. I've tried to highlight the key findings because there's a lot to pack into this, but we gave students the access to an assessment matrix with range statements, but a lot of them felt less concerned about the mark and actually didn't even really refer to the assessment matrix because it was pass-fail. And then one of the students actually felt they could work more creatively and take more risks because there was less emphasis on looking at the nuances of an assessment matrix. I think there is some research that's been done into pass-fail modules. Often the marking process inhibits creativity. Students often see their mark as a judgment on their talent and themselves. And that's possibly something that could happen, that is happening earlier on in schools where students are streamlined. And I think that generally the students on our pilot felt they were encouraged to work more creatively without so much of an emphasis on assessment. It helps with a smoother transition into university life. I think that's everything I'm going to try and say here because I'm running out of time.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark. And that's actually massively interesting from the consultations that I've done with secondary schools as well, where the feeling is very much that all of the teaching is geared towards the assessment. So it's specifically, here's what we're going to assess, here's the things you need to learn. Whereas really, it never used to be like that a long, long time ago, where you have the content and then you are assessed just based on it. And you're not thinking about the assessment when you're doing your pieces of work, because you shouldn't be thinking about assessment for that. It should just be a capturing of how well you've taken in all the content and all the learning that's happened. And you kind of flipped the script on them there by removing some of the pressures of assessment by making it pass fail. That's really interesting.
I think
thanks so much for sharing.
Just to highlight the one bit I did miss off, the key insight really was that higher end achievers felt they weren't getting the benefit of the effort they're putting. They wanted to know what the real mark was, and perhaps students that were on the bottom end and at risk of failure just saw the green light and felt, I'm doing fine. That they were the kind of negative aspects.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks so much for sharing. I think we have one more contributor if Ian is around and ready to go.
Yes, I don't have slides, so you've just got me.
Quite all right.
Just following up from Mark, what Mark's just said, Robert Persig wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He did the same experiment with his class, and exactly the same thing happened. Students that do well sought assessment, they sought that qualification, and the students that didn't, they needed the feedback, but perhaps didn't. I'm surprised by the word expert. But where I'm coming from is I'm working for the Open University at the moment, but actually I've got 27 years secondary school experience. I started when design technology was perhaps, in my experience, a very exciting subject. You had wood, metal, plastics, electronics. You made a lot of stuff. Students had a lot of fun. We had a lot of equipment, and we perhaps had quite a bit of time. We had good connections with our primary schools. 27 years, and I think I've watched that slowly decay and get eaten away. And I think that's what I'm looking for is how do we get that back? How do we put back in resources into primary school so they can actually make stuff rather than rushing for a couple of hours to stick some balsa wood together and then that's the technology box ticked, done that and move on. And actually that time factor is in the secondary school as well. English, maths, geography, and then 50 minutes of a design technology lesson, which you spend tidying up and putting everything away. That's not design technology. That is focusing on bits of knowledge, them learning this stuff and being able to put it down on a piece of paper. Would you let a doctor operate on you if they'd never practiced or felt the inside of a cadaver and had that practical experience? You wouldn't. We wouldn't do that to them. We don't have pilots that only fly drones. We put them in airplanes so they can feel the atmosphere around them. And yet we want to teach engineers and we want to teach designers without giving them it's a different way of knowing, and we're not willing to give them the time to develop that knowing. And I think it's very important that we get back to that. And my final point is we don't give credit to the people who teach the designers and engineers of the future, because they're not, to some extent. I mean, somebody said to me, oh, you're an engineer. I'm actually not an engineer. I engineer lessons that develop engineers. I engineer or design lessons that teach designers, but I'm neither of those things. And yet when I go to a professional body, they the IET or the IED or everything else, it's always very difficult to join those because I'm just the teacher. So we don't give anything to those teachers that give their lives to design and technology and engineering. We don't give them the qualifications or the opportunity to qualify the way that we do if they were professionals in. And no, we're not recruiting them because maybe we're not giving them anything. So I think there should be a pathway also for design technologists and design engineers that recognizes that actually they are engineers in the same way as anybody else is. They are designers. It's just that they've chosen to design lessons and engineer experiences rather than make something in the real world as sort of professionals. So those are my three things really. Sort primary school, give them something. Sort secondary school, give them time and give them resources, and stop rushing them. And thirdly, find a way of giving real credit to the design teachers and the design technology teachers and the art teachers who dedicate themselves to that process. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Ian. That's incredibly poignant, and I think actually an incredible segue into the conversations we're about to have in the breakout rooms as well. And thank you to all our speakers for sort of contributing and sharing with the panel. It's really valued, and we're very appreciative of it. And I think there will be some conversations that continue post this as asides as well. I'm certainly interested in learning more about what's going on out there. Alison, I won't take any credit for keeping things to time. That was 5 excellent speakers who knew exactly what they were doing. So I will just hand back to you now.
Thanks ever so much, Daniel. Thank you very much to everybody. I'm sorry that we're keeping this so tight and short. Okay, so we're going to move into breakouts. Now, people have been assigned if they filled in the survey, the pre-event survey. If you didn't, I've just done some random placing to try and sort you into a group. So that will happen automatically. I'm hoping that when I press a button. So we've got 4 discussions, as you can see on the left-hand side, and each room has a chair. So they've had a briefing. They know what they're about. There's a template that they will put in the chat, a link to, that's a Word document that during the breakout space and up until the 18th of November, you can add to, and you'll have links to all 4 rooms eventually that you can add to. And there are some specific review questions to go through as well that relate to higher education in specifically that we kind of picked out because we haven't got much time, but trying to keep it focused. Can I just explain that the templates that you've got are Word documents that you'll have a live link to. It's currently set up that anybody has access to them. So if you mistakenly forward that to somebody today, they will have access and they can edit. So I'm trusting people to be mindful of that. You might not want to put evidence in there if it's data from your university, so that's where I might encourage you to do a separate response, or you might want to put that in to add. We have got some talk about applying for some research funding or looking for a space to do some research longer term about changes in design courses and impact of what might be happening in schools along that way. Some of that evidence might help with that. So just be mindful, it's a shared document. I will close it at some point. If I feel it's been abused, I'm going to go into teacher mode and I will close it earlier than the 18th of November. Okay, but it is open for now. So this is what's going to happen. You've got 40 minutes. I'm going to move on because I'm looking at the time at 20 to 3. That means you're going to come back in here at 20 past 3, and I need a bit of time with you all at the end as well. Those are the breakout rooms that I had people organised in this morning. More of you, people who didn't read the instructions, hadn't signed up, so I've had to kind of add you in late. There's a couple of you I still haven't placed, and you can see I was typing last minute, so I've got some spelling mistakes. Okay, so but that will happen automatically. You will go into your groups, and then just a reminder, as you're talking about evidence, quantitative data is obviously. So hopefully that was useful. I will sort out those links. I'm just going to share the last few slides of the PowerPoint and then we'll bring this to a close. So this is the next steps and timeline. We're here today. If you've got things that you want to submit to those documents, if they don't work, send them to me or Daniel. Me and Daniel will work on doing a draft. We'll try and get that out to share. If there's any final contributions to get that to the deadline of the 22nd. And if you're okay for us to add your name, then we'll just make sure that's all in place as well. Okay. I'll share this PowerPoint so you've got those dates to follow up. So, staying connected. We've got this forum. We've set this up. We can have another group again if we need to, or we can connect via Teams if any of you want to make connections with myself or Daniel or anybody else in the group to follow up or kind of talk through your evidence. You're more than welcome to do that. There are some follow-up meetings happening. Now, next Wednesday at 4 o'clock, I'm running a similar event for design and technology teachers, primary and secondary teachers. That will not be about helping them write a collaborative response. That's about helping them write their own. If you want to come and eavesdrop in on that, can you let me know? And I will be saying very clearly that you can only eavesdrop rather than participate. okay, because it is a meeting for design and technology teachers. So let me know about that one. And then we've got funding to host a face-to-face meeting at Nottingham Trent on January the 24th. It's a Friday. The timings are something like 11 till 2. Lunch will be provided. So I've got money for food. And then we're going to bring some teachers together, and you'll be invited to kind of have some sort of cross-percolation about design education in schools and its impact on higher education and vice versa. And we'll be inviting somebody from the panel to attend that as well. So, evidence sharing, then please do think about, if you want to email stuff to me or Daniel, you can do so to follow up. You've got my contact information. If you're willing to have your contact information shared, there's a survey coming up tomorrow. It's not an evaluation. I don't want to know that you were annoyed about the technology. It's more about whether you found this useful or whether you want to keep in contact with different people. That will be coming out if you're willing to share your email address. And finally, if anybody, I've got about 3 minutes. If anybody's got any clarifications, any thoughts about additional contributors, thank you to people who put in the pre-event about other people that you thought we might be able to reach out, or any final thoughts. Daniel, I'm going to open to you. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I mean, just the classic. Thank you all for your engagement and taking part. It's I was saying in the interim here that it's actually a really exciting time, I think, for design education, and there's a real opportunity here. And having so many people who are so engaged and enthused by the subject is a real positive. And I'm hoping we can put a good case across to the review panel, along with all the other cases that are being made for creative and design education, so that they actually give this some real consideration and start progressing things in the way that we want to see it. So thank you all for your involvement, and I hope to speak to you all in the future as well.
Yeah, thank you to everybody. Have any got any quick questions, comments? We've got 6 minutes left. There's 2 polls in the chat. That'd be really great if you could fill those in. That'd be lovely. If anybody's got any comments, thoughts, anybody from the groups want to chair the groups, want to give any quick comments?
I will chime in here, Alison, and say firstly, sorry to my group. We definitely didn't have enough time. And also, just to, I suppose, we were looking at assessment and accountability, and it's just huge. There's kind of so much to discuss, and to try and distill into a couple of minutes really is really, really difficult. But also that we don't all agree, and I think that that's also really useful and really, really important to acknowledge that we don't all kind of share views or share the same views on things. I think, yeah, just wanted to sort of say that out loud.
Okay, thanks, Alice. Thanks for chairing as well.
I was just going to say as well, had a great discussion in our group, and just really encourage people to fill out those kind of forms if they want to fill out evidence or kind of examples after this meeting's kind of ended, just so we can kind of draw on that for the review.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Rachel. Ben, you were chairing as well. I don't know whether you've got anything.
Yeah, there was some definite consensus areas of discussion that came out from the questions that we looked at, and also some concerns, but also some ideas of how things could be improved, moving forward as well. So yeah, it was a positive discussion as far as I could see. Yeah, as was mentioned, please do add in some detail of the notes that I managed to scroll down as we were going through the actual discussion itself. So do jump in and put in any other thoughts that you think that would be useful for this discussion. Yeah.
Thanks ever so much, Ben. You were press ganged into chairing, so thank you for being a willing volunteer in the end. And Mel, anything from your group?
Yeah, we had a good discussion, but yes, we ran out of time. There was quite a bit of helpful discussion and consensus around how we seed experiences with students throughout their years, by maybe using industry more, coming in and inspiring these young people, universities, challenging them to sort of spend a bit more time and coming in and sort of helping them to think in different ways. We also sort of talked about using sort of smaller case studies and examples. So let's not always, you know, sort of reach for the stars and use the big shiny examples, but let's, you know, use lots more diverse and more inclusive and smaller examples that, you know, these students can aspire to and are inspired by. I shared a bit about the sort of patterns in the data that we've been looking at, the different qualification routes that are joining our courses. Derek was quite sort of interested because obviously with Open University, it's a very different sort of background and pathway that they join. And then we also had a conversation about whether or not, well, there appears to be some universities that are going back to interviewing rather than just getting portfolios submitted and assessed sort of online, and whether that's more inclusive approach. So yeah, lots of good discussion, but I would please once again encourage our group to fill in that sheet, because I tried to capture as much as I can, and I did record it.
Oh, brilliant.
But yeah, putting it into everyone's own words would be much better than my scribbles.
Yeah. So whatever way people want to find of getting their responses to us, that'd be fantastic. I'm always very mindful. I'm doing collective emails about making sure email address is in the blind copy, so which kind of makes it a bit interesting when I'm doing things. But you know, people have got my contact details. Daniel, you can put yours in the chat as well, so you know it's not just me. Because I'm going to go and lie down in the dark room for a little bit now.
You deserve it.
And the dog hasn't barked, so that's what's always interesting. But I did want to share, so I've been running a series on my podcast. I do a podcast called Talking D&T. Been running a series on there with different viewpoints, and there's people in this group who have been on the podcast. It's aimed at design and technology teachers, so if you want to hear some of those, I've put those in the chat. And you've also got a sneak preview to one with Michelle Gregson next week, from the National Society of Education in Art and Design, as well as, you know, kind of building up to the review. So please do listen to those, and please do let me know if you think you've got an opinion that D&T teachers might want to hear about. But yeah, thank you very much, everybody. And if you haven't responded to the poll, please do. It's 3:30 and I think it's class dismissed. But thank you very much for your time.